The boy had not spoken in 4 months. Not to the grief counselors who came on Tuesdays with their soft voices and their careful questions. Not to the teachers at his school in Oakville who left notes in his agenda that his father read and then folded and put in a drawer. Not to his grandmother, who flew in from Halifax the week after the funeral and stayed for 3 weeks and cried in the kitchen when she thought no one could hear. He ate, he slept, sometimes. He sat by the window in his room and looked out at the backyard where the maple tree still had a rope swing his mother had helped him hang 2 summers ago, and he did not touch it, and he did not speak, and the house was very quiet, in a way that a house should never be quiet when a child lives inside it. His father, whose name was Donovan Achterberg, was 44 years old and had built a logistics software company from a basement office in Mississauga into something that was now worth more than most people could picture. He was the kind of man who solved problems. He had always been the kind of man who solved problems. He had solved cash flow crises at 2 in the morning and regulatory setbacks that would have ended other companies and a hostile acquisition attempt that made the news for 6 weeks. He had never once solved a problem by waiting. But his son was 8 years old and had not spoken in 4 months, and Donovan did not know what to do with that. His son's name was Felix, and here the irony was not lost on anyone who had known the boy before. Felix, which meant happy, which meant fortunate, which was what the boy had been before. The woman who came to work for them arrived on a Thursday in October. Her name was Amma Boaki Crawford, and she was 38 years old, and she had taken the job through an agency that specialized in household staffing for high-net-worth families in the GTA. The agency had described her as experienced, discreet, and excellent with children. The file had included references from 3 previous families, 2 in Forest Hill and 1 in the Bridle Path. Donovan had read the file on a Tuesday and called the agency on a Wednesday, and she had arrived on Thursday with a canvas bag over one shoulder and work shoes that had seen better days and an expression on her face that was quiet and composed and did not look like someone performing composure. She was not tall. She wore her hair natural, pulled back, and she moved through the kitchen on that first morning with an unhurried ease that Donovan noticed and could not quite name. Not careless, not casual. Something else, like a person who had long since stopped spending energy on things that did not matter. He showed her the house. She asked practical questions, where the cleaning supplies were, which days the recycling went out, whether Felix had any food allergies. She did not ask about the boy's silence, though the agency had mentioned it. She did not look at the framed photographs of Rachel in the hallway, with the expression that most people could not seem to help, that mixture of pity and discomfort that Donovan had come to dread. She just noted where things were and went to work. Donovan watched her for 3 days before he understood that he was watching her. He told himself it was reasonable caution. He had a child in the house. He had a child who was vulnerable in ways that Donovan could not fully quantify and that frightened him in ways he would not say out loud. He had every right to observe the person he had brought into his home. He started leaving for the office later than usual. He found reasons to come back at lunch. He sat in the study on the 2nd floor, with the door half open, where he could hear what was happening in the rooms below without being seen. He told himself he was being a careful father. He was not being a careful father. He was doing what he had always done when he did not know how to face something directly. He was gathering information. He was watching from a distance. He was solving the problem of Amma Boaki Crawford the way he solved all problems, by understanding her before she understood him. What he saw those first 2 weeks was not what he expected. She did not try to talk to Felix. This was not what the grief counselors had done. The grief counselors tried to talk to Felix. They asked him questions, and waited, and asked different questions, and explained that it was okay not to talk, and then, eventually, talked anyway, to the space where his answers would have been. The teachers tried to draw him out with special projects and quiet encouragement. His grandmother tried with food and stories, and once, memorably, a trip to the science center that had ended with Felix sitting on a bench outside the butterfly exhibit, looking at the floor. Amma did not try. She moved around him the way water moves around stone. Present, continuous, unhurried, and entirely without demand. She made lunch and left a plate at the kitchen table and went back to folding laundry and did not look up to see if he ate it. She cleaned around him when he was in the living room. She said things, occasionally. But they were not questions and they were not invitations. She said things like, "The light's doing something strange through that window today." And, "I found a sweater in the dryer that I don't think goes with anything else in this house." And then she kept moving. Donovan watched this from the hallway, from the study, from behind the partially closed door of the pantry once, which he was aware was an undignified location for a man who had been profiled in the Financial Post. He could not tell what she was doing. He could not tell if it was strategy or simply her nature. He could not tell if she had a plan. He watched her. It was a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after she arrived. When Donovan was standing in the utility room off the kitchen, he had come back early from a meeting downtown, told himself he needed to grab a file from the house office, and he heard something through the door. Not talking. Something else. A sound he had not heard in 4 months. He stood very still, his hand on the doorframe, and listened. Felix was in the kitchen. Amma was at the counter, doing something with her back to the room. And the sound was Felix. Not words, not sentences. But something that started as a question, a kind of short, involuntary sound, the sound a child makes when something crosses their mind and their body reacts before their brain can stop it. Amma did not turn around. She said. Not a question, not encouragement, just acknowledgement. Like she had heard a sound and registered it the way you register a door opening down the hall. There was a long silence. Then Felix, in a voice so small and disused that Donovan's chest did something he was not prepared for, said, "What are you making?" Not a question exactly. The punctuation was wrong. It came out flat and careful, like a test. Like something being lowered on a rope to see if the ground below would hold. Amma still did not turn around. "Egusi soup," she said. "My grandmother's version, she was from Kumasi. Different from how other people make it." She paused. "You probably won't like it." Another long silence. "Why?" Felix said. "Because you're 8 and it has spinach in it," she said. "And because my grandmother put a lot of pepper in hers, and I put a lot of pepper in mine, and most 8-year-olds I've met are not really a lot of pepper crowd." Donovan stood in the utility room and did not breathe. "I might like it," Felix said. "You might," Amma agreed, and turned to get something from the cupboard, and did not make a thing of it, did not look at him, or smile at him, in the pointed way that would have reminded him that he had just spoken for the first time in 4 months, and that everyone around him had been waiting and worrying, and that this moment was significant. She just turned to get something from the cupboard and kept cooking, and Donovan, standing behind the utility room door, pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and stood there for a long time. He did not tell the grief counselor. He told himself it was because he didn't want to jinx anything. That was not entirely dishonest. Felix spoke again the next morning. Small things, still, declarative, cautious. The bird came back. There are only 4 crackers left. Amma received each of these the same way she'd received the first, without making it a landmark, without looking up from whatever she was doing as if she was afraid he might spook. She responded to the information he gave her and moved on. Donovan started watching differently. He stopped hiding behind doors. He came home at lunch and sat at the kitchen counter with his laptop and worked or pretended to work, while Amma moved around the space and Felix sat at the table working on something from school. He told himself this was more honest. He told himself he was not watching her. Specifically, he was simply in the room. He noticed things he had not noticed from the hallway. The way she laughed at something, Felix said. Really laughed, not the supervised, careful laugh of an adult managing a child, but the quick, genuine kind that surprised her face. The way she sat down next to him once, when he was stuck on a math problem, not to help him, just to sit, and then looked at the problem herself and said, "Honestly, I'm not sure that makes sense either." which was almost certainly not the correct pedagogical approach, and which made Felix look up at her with something in his face that Donovan had not seen in a long time. Something that looked, very faintly, like the beginning of amusement. He noticed the way she moved through the house, not like someone who was aware of being watched, not performing ease, just genuinely at ease. He noticed that she brought her own tea in a thermos and drank it at 10 o'clock every morning. He noticed that she hummed, sometimes, something low and rhythmic that he could not identify. He noticed that she had a small scar on her left wrist, and that she wore a ring on her right hand, not her left, and that she never talked about herself unless someone asked. He noticed that he was noticing. He told himself this was still observation. It was harder to believe. He looked her up. It was a Tuesday evening. Felix was asleep. Donovan sat at his desk and typed her name into a search bar, and then sat back and looked at what came up. There was more than he expected. Amma Boaki Crawford had, before the household work, been something else entirely. There was an archived piece from a community newspaper in Scarborough. She had grown up. In Scarborough, he learned, in a neighborhood near Lawrence and Markham, in a house with her mother and an aunt who had come from Ghana when Amma was 3. She had won a scholarship to study at the University of Guelph. She had for a while run a small social enterprise, a food program for kids in low-income communities on the east side of Toronto. It had run for 4 years and had served, by the time it closed, over 2,000 children. There was a brief interview, the kind a small local paper does, with a photograph that must have been taken 8 or 9 years ago. She was standing in a community kitchen, wearing an apron, and she was looking at someone off camera and laughing at something. And in the photograph, the laugh was already past the peak of it, settling into something quieter. He read the interview twice. She had not closed the program because it failed. She had closed it because her mother got sick, and she needed to come home and take care of her, and she could not do both. The interviewer had asked if that was hard, and she had said, yes, and then, after a pause, but some things are more important than the thing you built. That's not a tragedy. That's just knowing what matters. Donovan closed the laptop. He sat for a while in the dark. He asked her, the next morning, about Scarborough. She looked up from the sink with an expression that was not quite surprise but was adjacent to it. The look of someone recalibrating a situation they thought they understood. You looked me up, she said. It was not an accusation. It was just a fact, offered back to him. Yes, he said. She considered him for a moment, then went back to the dishes. I haven't been back much, she said. My mother passed 3 years ago. There's not much to go back to. I'm sorry, he said. Thank you. A pause, the kind that is not uncomfortable but is honest. I read about your wife. When I took the job, I thought Felix's father should know that, so it's not something I'm carrying around secretly. He looked at her. That seems fair. I liked what she did, Amma said. The food bank work, the school garden project in Hamilton. She had a lot of energy from what I read. She did, he said. His voice was level. He had practiced making his voice level when this subject came up. She never really stopped. Felix is like her? He thought about it. He was, he said. He's finding his way back to it, I think. Amma nodded, not quickly. He is, she said, and the certainty in it, quiet, unperformed, as if she had simply observed something true. Settled something in Donovan that had not been settled in a long time. He told his sister about her the following weekend, on the phone. His sister, Renee, lived in Vancouver and had 2 teenagers, and a direct manner that he had always found clarifying. You hired someone, Renee said. You looked her up. You've been staying home to watch her work. You asked her about her childhood. I was being thorough. Donovan. I have a child in the house. Donovan, his sister said again, with the exact tone she had used when they were teenagers, and he was trying to explain why something was not what it appeared to be. He was quiet for a moment. She got him talking, he said. Renee was quiet too for a moment on the other end. In how long? 3 weeks. Another pause. Then I think, his sister said carefully, that you should probably not make this weird. I'm not making it weird. You're describing it like a surveillance operation. I'm being cautious. You're being scared, Renee said, not unkindly. Which is fine, but don't let it make you do something that ruins something good. November came. Felix started talking in longer units. He told Amma about a book he had been reading, something about a kid who discovers a hidden door in a library. He told her that he thought the family down the street had gotten a new dog because the old one had a brown patch near its ear and this one didn't. He told her, one afternoon, that his mother had called him her little professor because he always asked why things worked the way they did. Amma listened in the way she always listened, not inserting herself, not redirecting, not responding with a story of her own that was meant to show she understood. She listened the way some people have always known how to listen, which is without waiting for their turn. She said, after the little professor story, "That sounds like she knew you very well." Felix looked at the table. "She did," he said. "That's a good thing," Amma said, "even when it hurts, to have been known like that by someone." Felix was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Do you think she can still see me?" The question landed in the kitchen and stayed there. Amma was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, thinking. "I think," she said, "that the people who love us that much don't entirely stop. I don't think I could explain it exactly, but I think love like that leaves a mark on the world, and I think the marks stay." Felix considered this with the seriousness he brought to everything. "Like a groove," he said, "like when you press a pen into a page." "Yes," Amma said, "like that." Donovan was in the hallway. He had come downstairs to get water and had stopped outside the kitchen door and had stood there for the entire conversation. He stood there for a while after it ended too. He was not ashamed of being there. He was not performing surveillance. He was a man standing in the hallway of his own house in November, and his son had just described grief in terms of a pen pressed into a page, and the woman in the kitchen had met him there without flinching, and Donovan was only a man. And some things undo you even when you are the kind of man who solves problems. He made dinner that night. This was not something he did often. He found a recipe online for jollof rice and made a significant error involving the ratio of tomato and had to add more stock twice, and the result was not quite right, but it was not quite wrong either. And he set the table and called Felix down, and Amma came in to collect her bag to leave for the day and stopped in the kitchen doorway. "You made dinner," she said. "I attempted dinner." Felix said, "It smells weird," with the cheerful authority of a child who has recently remembered how to have opinions. "That's the smoked paprika," Donovan said. "I may have overdone it." Amma looked at the pot and then at him. "Did you use long grain or parboiled?" The bag said long grain. She made a face that was not unkind. "That's why. I didn't know there was a difference. There's a big difference." He looked at her. "Are you going to tell me, or are you going to make me figure it out on my own?" Something shifted in her expression. Quick, controlled, but there. Like a door opened an inch and then caught. "Parboiled," she said. "The starch is different. It holds up better." She paused. "It's still edible." High praise. Felix said, from the table, "Amma, are you staying for dinner?" The question came out easily, without calculation, the way children ask things, from the simple logic of wanting someone to stay. Donovan looked at his son and then at Amma, who had her bag over her shoulder and who was looking at Felix with an expression he had not seen on her face before. Not surprise, exactly. Moved, he thought, by how simply it had been asked. "I have to get home," she said gently. "But thank you, Felix. That's a very kind invitation." Felix accepted this with equanimity and reached for the bread. Amma said good night and left, and Donovan sat down across from his son, and they ate the not quite right jollof rice together. And Felix talked about the library book, and outside the kitchen window, the first snow of the season had started, small and provisional, as if the weather was also working up to something. He called the agency in December to formally extend the arrangement through the spring. The woman at the agency said she would confirm with Amma and send updated paperwork. She mentioned, as a formality, that this would constitute a longer-term placement and asked if Donovan was satisfied with the arrangement. He said yes. He said it simply, without elaboration, which was not how he usually answered questions. 2 days later, He found himself walking past the study in the morning when Amma was in there with Felix, helping him set up something on his tablet, and he heard her laugh again. That real laugh, unguarded, in response to something Felix had said. And he stood in the hallway and understood, with the clarity that only comes when you have been avoiding something long enough, that what he felt was not gratitude. Gratitude was part of it. Gratitude was the manageable part. The rest of it was larger and considerably less convenient, and he understood, been aware of it for some time. He was very careful. He was careful because she worked for him. He was careful because his son was attached to her, and because that attachment was still new and tender and not something to be disrupted. He was careful because the last time he had loved someone had been a long time, and his wife had been gone for less than a year. And he did not entirely trust his own accounting of what he was feeling. He was also, if he was honest with himself, and December had a way of making him honest, the short days and the cold and the quality of the light. He was careful because he knew what he stood to lose. So, he was careful. He did not say anything. He made dinner a second time, more successfully. He asked her questions about the food program she had run, about Guelph, about the aunt who had come from Ghana. She answered carefully at first, and then less carefully, and once she said something and then stopped and said, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." And he said, "I don't mind," and she looked at him for a moment and then continued. He did not say anything. Felix said it first. It was a Saturday in February, which in Oakville is the kind of cold that stops being weather and starts being a condition of existence. Amma had come in on a Saturday because Donovan had a board meeting he could not reschedule, which he had felt guilty about in a way that surprised him given that he had never previously felt guilty about a board meeting. He came home at 3 o'clock to find Felix and Amma in the living room. Felix was on the floor with a large sheet of paper and a collection of markers. Amma was on the couch reading. Not supervising, not engaging, just present in the same room, reading her own book, while Felix made something on the floor. Donovan stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment. Then Felix looked up from the paper. He looked at Amma on the couch. He looked at the drawing in front of him, which appeared to be a house with several figures of varying sizes in front of it. "This one's you," Felix said, pointing at one of the figures. "You're the tallest one in the drawing, even though you're actually not the tallest one in real life, but I made you taller because it's my drawing and I can." Amma looked up from her book. "That seems like a fair use of artistic license." "And this one's Dad," Felix said, pointing at the largest figure. "And this is me." He paused, looking at the drawing. "I put you in the house picture," he said, "because you're part of ours." The room was very quiet. Amma lowered the book slowly. She looked at the drawing. Her face did the thing it rarely did, which was to not quite hold everything in. Something crossing it that was real and undefended. A particular kind of being moved that does not have a tidy name. "Felix," she said. Her voice was steady but careful, the way you hold something very full. "You don't have to say anything," Felix said, with the straightforward pragmatism of an 8-year-old who had recently learned that some moments do not require filling. "I just wanted you to know." Donovan was still in the doorway. He had not moved. Felix looked up and noticed him. "Dad," he said, "I put Amma in the house picture." "I saw that," Donovan said. Felix went back to his drawing. Amma looked up and found Donovan's face, and they looked at each other for a moment, over Felix's head, over the drawing, over the distance of a winter afternoon, in a house that had been quiet for too long, and was quiet now in an entirely different way. He walked with her to her car when she left that evening. The driveway was iced over, and the streetlights were on, and the cold was significant. She had her coat on, and her bag over her shoulder, and she moved toward her car, and he walked beside her, and neither of them said anything until they reached it. She put her hand on the door handle and did not open it. "He's okay," she said. "I want you to know that. He's actually okay." "I know," Donovan said. "He was always going to find his way back," she said. "He's a resilient kid. You raised him right." "His mother raised him right," Donovan said. "I showed up when I could." "That's not," she started, and then stopped, and then, You showed up more than you think you did. Felix talks about you, the things you say to him, the way you handle things. Donovan looked at the street. The snow on the lawn was very still. Amma, he said. I know, she said quietly. He looked at her. You know, I'm not unaware, she said, of the situation. I don't want to make this. I'm not trying to complicate your employment. I know, and I'm aware that the timing is not ideal. It rarely is, she said, which was perhaps not the answer he was expecting, and her voice when she said it was not closed. I don't know what I'm asking, he said. I'm not asking anything. I didn't want to stand in the doorway of my own house and not say that what I feel is not only gratitude, because I've been calling it gratitude, and I'm aware that's not entirely honest. Amma was quiet for a moment. The cold settled around them. There are things to consider, she said finally. There are, he agreed. Felix, yes. The fact that you employ me, yes. The fact that it hasn't been very long, all of that, he said. I know. I'm not asking you to resolve it tonight. I wanted to be honest with you. Because you're someone who deserves honesty. She looked at him for a long moment, and in the streetlight he could see her thinking. Not performing thought, actually thinking. The way she did everything. I'll see you Monday, she said, and her voice, when she said it, was not a closing. He stepped back. She got into the car. He stood at the end of his driveway and watched the taillights until they turned at the end of the street. And then he stood there a little longer in the cold, which was the kind of cold that reminds you are alive. The months that followed were not dramatic. They were careful and slow and real in the way that things are real when no one is performing them. There was a Sunday in March when she came over, because Felix had asked if they could make the egusi soup together and teach Donovan the right way. And they stood in the kitchen, all three of them, and she corrected his chopping technique with a patience he found both humbling and, he was honest enough to acknowledge, something else. There was an afternoon in April when he met her for coffee near her apartment in Leslieville, a coffee shop with mismatched chairs and the specific quality of light that comes from high north-facing windows. And they sat there for 2 hours and talked about nothing that was urgent and everything that mattered. He learned about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs, and who had read to Amma every night until she was 12, and who had said that the most important thing a person could do was stay interested in the world. He learned about the food program and the specific grief of closing something you built and still believing it was the right thing to do. He told her about starting the company in a basement, about the years that looked like failure from the inside, about how he had met Rachel at a conference in 2009 when he was broke and uncertain, and she had argued with him about something for 40 minutes and then given him her card. Amma laughed at that, the real laugh, unguarded, and it was better heard at close range. He did not rush anything. He did not have a plan. He had spent too many years with plans to trust them entirely. It was a June evening, after Felix had gone to bed, when Amma was in the kitchen finishing something, and Donovan came and stood in the doorway and watched her the way he had watched her in the beginning, from the utility room, from the hall, except that now he was in the doorway and she could see him. She looked up. "You're doing it again," she said. "What, standing there," she said. "You stand in doorways and watch people." "I've noticed. I observe," he said. "I'm a careful person." "You are," she agreed, and her voice was warm when she said it, not pointed. He came into the kitchen. He stood near the counter, not far from her, closer than was entirely ambiguous. "I want to ask you something," he said. She looked at him steadily. "I know we said slow," he said, "and I mean that. This isn't a proposal. That's not what this is." "Okay," she said. "I just want to know if what I think is happening is actually happening. Because I'd like to not be the only person in the room who knows what room they're in." Amma was quiet for a moment. Then she set down what she was holding, and she turned toward him properly, and she said, "Donovan, you are not the only person in the room who knows what room they're in." He exhaled. It was not a dignified exhale, but it was honest. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. And they stood there in the kitchen, in the ordinary light of an ordinary evening. And outside the maple tree in the backyard, moved in a small wind, and the rope swing moved with it, and neither of them said anything for a while. Because not everything needs to be said immediately, and some rooms you simply agree to be in together, and that is the beginning. Felix figured it out by July. He came to his father one morning and said, with the composed certainty of a child who has thought something through, "You like Amma, actually like." Donovan put down his coffee. "What makes you say that? Because you look at her like you looked at Mom sometimes," Felix said. "Not the sad way, the other way." Donovan considered several responses and discarded all of them. "Is that okay with you?" he asked. Felix picked up a piece of toast. He considered the question with appropriate seriousness. "I put her in the house picture in February," he said, as if this settled the matter. "You did," Donovan said. "So," Felix said, and shrugged, and took a bite of toast. Donovan looked at his son, at this boy who had been silent for 4 months, and who now ate toast, and rendered judgments, and put people in house pictures, and who was. Donovan understood with a clarity that stopped his breath for a moment, going to be all right. And he thought about everything the year had cost, and everything it had also, quietly, given. And he did not say anything for a moment, because sometimes the only honest response to grace is to simply receive it. Outside the kitchen window, the maple tree was green and full, and the rope swing hung in the still morning air, and the summer light came through at an angle that lit the whole kitchen gold.